Hi and welcome back to Channel Zero X. I'm Michael Landon and this is Caroline.
Hey everybody, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, guys. Noah Centennial, is that how we say it? I think that's how we say it. There's no
Yeah,
other
or
way. I think
Centenio, it might be Centenio.
Centennial.
Centenio, I think.
I think I prefer Centennial. Is in talks to play He-Man in Sony and Mattel Films' Masters of the Universe. This is an exclusive from The Wrap. She was published on the 20th, but it's been talked about a little bit in the last
Let me
couple of
just
days.
say Umberto Gonzalez.
Yeah, from Umberto Gonzalez of The Wrap, Access Media shill website, but there's not much to shill in this particular article. It's a rather perfunctory notification to everybody that Noah Centineo is in talks, indeed, in talks only. So let's not get too jaded just yet. If you've seen these photographs, you probably won't be too impressed in his prospect of playing, the muscle-bound superhero from our childhoods, simply because He-Man was in no way a boy. It was not some kind of like corn-fed farm boy like Luke Skywalker or anything like that.
Yeah,
or
but sorry, just to
young
interject.
Brendan Fraser.
I don't know this guy at all. I mean, he's a young guy. He's not known to me, but looking at him,
Some young guy.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
no, no, I don't know. He's a young guy,
yeah.
and yeah.
He
As you say, I don't think
he
it's the gravitas
uh,
to
it,
play
it
it.
it doesn't sound like he's got a huge pedigree, but I guess if he's only about 6 years old, he's not really gonna, is he? But
Yes.
he's done okay with some shows which we're going to mention here. I don't know if any of you guys will have heard of any of these shows. Let us know if he's any good. Let us know if you've seen him doing his stuff, and can he bring anything to this role? Do you think there's anything that can be brought to this role, or is this really to you just kind of a plastic doll, a cipher for wish fulfillment, power fantasy? That could be no bad thing either way if it was done in a spirit of fun. I think
Yeah, sorry, I
this
don't
one
know
could
if we
be.
said that. Sorry to interrupt. I don't know if we said that this is coming from the source is an individual with knowledge of the project who's exclusively talking. So
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure on how what's the
Well,
word,
yeah,
accurate this
there's
is.
been so many things in the rumor mill. It seems it's almost been 20 years since there's been talk of a He-Man film coming out. Every year, every 6 months, there's supposed to be some groundbreaking story. But from what I understand, I mean, the rap variety have also been talking about this. I guess that there may be some validity to it, uh, but only time will tell. But let's see what we can glean. Let's see if we can, divine the future here.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
will a movie into existence through sheer force of will,
a good movie
even if
though.
it means Noah being cast in the role. I don't know if I can go that far, but let's read on.
Anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's Aaron and Adam Nee, who I'm sorry I also haven't heard of, are set to direct from a script rewritten by Iron Man screenwriters Matt Holloway and Art Markham.
hmm Yeah. Based on Mattel's hugely successful 1980s toy line, Master of the Universe, as you I'm sure all know, follows Prince Adam, heir to the throne of planet Eternia, who uses the magical power sword to transform into the heroic He-Man. With the help of his allies Teela, Man-at-Arms, Orko, and the Sorceress, He-Man defends the kingdom from the evil wizard Skeletor, surnamed because his face is an exposed skull, who seeks to gain control of Castle Grayskull, source of He-Man's powers.
Do you
Now,
know, I have to say, I loved that show. I really loved that cartoon. And they haven't mentioned Cringer
you,
either,
you,
have they?
but there's something interesting that I think He-Man aficionados, people who bought the toys, had the comics that were packaged with the toys and everything.
You just
This told
doxed
of a
your age.
this kind of told of a very kind of different type of He-Man. You could see that there was much more of the Conan influence there. It was a much darker story. It was more kind of like Thor in the comics. It wasn't tongue in cheek. It was like pretty much straight kind of barbarian fantasy. There wasn't really any humor. It was all pretty bleak, actually. I'm not saying that those comics were any good. I actually do prefer the cartoon, the
Yeah,
light-hearted comic
I
which it
didn't
was
read the
based.
comics,
But
but
there
I
is
loved the
something. But
cartoon.
there is something which does fascinate me, which if they went in this direction, this is actually, I think, what most people who know He-Man from way far back in the day would most like to see. And there was some extraordinary box art on these that came with these toys, most of us probably would have thrown it in away regardless of how majestic that art was. But from some real amazing artists who were just work for hire, but they really conveyed a world you could easily compete with something like Star Wars, could even blow it out of the water if it was done right. I'm not exaggerating. There was some really extraordinary looking work, especially where at a time when you hadn't been exposed to so much amazing concept art as there's floating around on the internet like now. Back then it was not influenced by too many sources. Maybe a classic artist like fantasy artist like Frank Frazetta, but for the most part these were taking these kind of goofy-ish characters and giving them a sense of weight and drama I don't think I've ever seen replicated, probably never will again. These people were lightning in a bottle. If they could capture that in a film, this would be a very different take, a very different He-Man from anything we'd seen before. I know I went on about that, but that's just something I just want to get my 2 cents in there. If I could plant seeds and make Sony maybe consider what direction they could still go in this. Yeah, I would like them to retain the kindly spirit of the cartoon, but not to forget that there is some kind of, there's pathos and drama and action in there, which doesn't have to be just a cheesy. Can actually be
but I don't
pretty.
think it always is. I don't think the whole of the He-Man cartoon was cheesy.
Well, I mean, if you revisit, I don't think it was never meant to be.
I suppose, now I'm not a kid.
It was never meant to be pulse pounding in the way I think a Swashbuckler, even like New Hope was, or anything like that. It was meant to just divert kids for 20 minutes. Did the job very well, but we want to engage all kinds of people now, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I saw the Masters of the Universe film, Dolph Lundgren, which I did watch, and I did, to be honest, think was awful. I mean,
you're not alone. I think
film.
there's not a huge coterie of real rabid Master of the Universe 1987 fans out there. There are people out there who love the movie, but it is much more of a cult status than anything that's ever broken into mainstream awareness, I would have said. Master of the Universe was previously adapted as a live-action film in 1907, as we just said, with Dolph Lundgren as He-Man, Frank Langella, Skeletor, who actually did a pretty good job, considering. He was actually given some pretty cool lines. He said some things that were actually pretty dark and pretty insightful, I think, about how he felt about his adversary, He-Man. Because he said stuff like, tell me, He-Man, about the loneliness of good. When he was absorbed of the cosmic energy that he was looking for all this time from Castle Grayskull, he went into quite almost Shakespearean monologue about the sensations he was having, that he was almost getting transported into a real kind of trip, which made him completely even unconcerned about just simply having power over others. He felt that he literally was all others almost, to some extent.
Yeah, I think that came through much more in that film than the cartoon, although I'm very
fond of the cartoon. It had a couple of interesting bits there.
Anyway, that's we just thought we'd tell you that about, we're both big He-Man films, Mike of the comics and the cartoon, me of the cartoon. I haven't seen the comics.
The comics were okay, but again, they were just meant to sell the toys. They weren't meant to do anything other than that job. The box art was almost a different thing altogether. It was accidentally transcended the medium.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, some of it anyway.
Yeah, anyway, I think it's time to say goodnight. Wherever you are, have a good evening and stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Catch you around.